Going live. Horseshoes. This meeting's being live streamed. Yeah, I got it. I got to go Zoom because I'm going to share my screen today, and Facebook does not yet have that technology. It's beyond them, and I got to mute my. Let's mute that. There we go. Okay, cool. I'm going to take this. We've got our better office angle. People love this office angle. They're like, oh, I can see stuff that I always wondered before, Adam. Now I don't have to wonder. Now it's available to me. I'm going to make it like this so I can see comments. Just going to get ourselves set up nice and good here. We're going to pour a bit of tea. You can see the Battle Teapot right here. My cleaner was like, it's such a nice teapot, but it weighs like 1,000 pounds. And that it does. The tall pour. Ooh, I just about spilled tea all over the place. Onto me. This is a big mug. This is my favorite mug. It is a clay mug. I got it in Hope, BC, which is like not the most inspiring place, but it's cool. I like Hope. But what's satisfying, first of all, good size. You can get a good amount of coffee or tea in there. That's nice. You're not going back for too many refills. Thumb pad technology, so you can really get a good hold on it. Tea's a little cold. It's not as hot as I like it. And then just like good shape. Oh, all around good mug. Top quality, top shelf mug, favorite. Got some cool topics for you today. That's not the place I want to put my tea. I want to put it over here because then I've got my trackpad right here. Then I can access all my bits of technology and what have you. Okay, well, I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff. I'm going to talk about the video game I've been playing lately, 2, in fact. I'm going to show you this cool piece of rock. This is an amethyst, kind of like a dragon's tooth, really, like an amethyst shard. And what is most pleasing to me about it sits on my desk like this, boom, in this little cool wooden bowl I got at a neat place in Portland. That's the artist's name on the bottom. I think this is actually made from like a pulley or something that used to be on a boat. I believe that's why it's that shape. What's up, Andrew? I know I want to be outside too, but the weather's been kind of balls lately. So no is how I'm going to do that. Thanks, Zoom, for branding. Let me white label my stuff. I pay you enough money. Take that Zoom watermark out of there. The fact that I can broadcast to Zoom is a function of the fact that I upgraded the account I have. Anyhow, whatever. It's neither here nor there. So amethyst as a mineral, the technology of this particular rock, we would say, is to give access to the connection to the divine. You can make that mean whatever you want. But what I really like about this is it has these really super pleasing facets throughout it. It feels very good in the hand. And one of the things that really serves me, I find, is, well, I should go back. I have a tendency to get in my head. I get very thinky. My head gets very busy. And having stuff on my desk that's tactile is really nice. It's a way of bringing me back into my body. And so one of the ways that I use rocks, minerals, crystals, whatever you want to call them, is just to hold them and to run my fingers along them. So I always like when like this piece of carnelian has like a really nice bunch of smooth surface. You can tell that's like a good thumb pad. It's the same as this mug. It's almost like autistic kids. I think they call it stimming, I think is the name. So when kids have autism, they'll do things like tap themselves a bunch, and it sort of like alleviates it soothes or calms them. For me, having something to run my fingers over, it helps me get a little out of my head, gets me back into my body. And Adam in his body, that's a good thing. So I say. So anyhow, that's on my desk. That's our rock for today. So Rocky, if you show up later, you've missed rock talk. What great surfaces. And there's also a part here where I don't know if it's going to show up on camera. It looks super glass. Yeah, there you go. It almost looks liquidy or like melting ice. I don't know if they chiseled this. They chiseled part of it, but like that's just a beautiful piece of amethyst. Way to go, you. So there's that. We've talked about that. Next thing I'm going to talk about is like the video games that I've been playing lately, just to give you a quick video game update, because I know some of you are here like, what's the latest hot game for me to be playing? So we'll cover that. And then we'll get to like our topics. We've got a bunch from people that are really, really awesome. And I also want to go through the process of a weekly review. So I'm going to start there because that part will be a little visual, maybe not as helpful for people listening after the fact on the podcast. but a weekly review is maybe the most important part of my like a productivity structure, the structure I have in my life that supports me to be up to a bunch of stuff and not go absolutely insane. I still go insane a whole bunch of the time, but it goes a long way towards helping that. So let's get the casual stuff out of the way first. 2 games I've been playing lately. I've been playing Cyberpunk 2077. I think I might have mentioned this before. I'm still playing it. It's a great game. If you are a fan of big open world role-playing games like Skyrim, it's kind of like the classic. Maybe a little Grand Theft Auto, you know, kind of that. These days you could probably call that an open world RPG. What other ones are there? I guess maybe Elden Ring, but Elden Ring's a little different because the whole purpose of those games is like big, hard, highly skillful, very challenging boss fights. That's not really my jam. I like more like completing quests, running around the world. So Cyberpunk 27 is kind of like if you took a game like Skyrim and then you put it into the world of Shadowrun. Shadowrun's a cyberpunk setting. So the cyberpunk setting, you could think like Johnny Mnemonic, if you remember that movie. What else has been kind of in cyberpunk? I can't think of too much, but the whole vibe of it is like gloomy. The world is kind of run by mega corporations. Corporations and capitalism's run amok. Lots of biogenetic enhancements, lots of hacking. And what's cool about cyberpunk is like you can be an assassin, you can be a big bruiser who's genetically modified. You can be like a hacker. That's the route I took, kind of like a wizard, but like a techno shaman. So that game's cool. And I recommend that if you're looking for like kind of an epic game, something big. And then the other game that's just come out recently that I'm really stoked about is called Wild Frost. I got the link here. I'm gonna put this in the comments so that you can track it down on Steam yourself. Wild Frost just came out, and what Wild Frost is a deck building game. Deck builders are the best from me. There's a couple things that I really like about deck builders. The first is they're turn-based, so there isn't like that urgency. You know, you can kind of stop at any point. You don't usually want to, but you can relax. You have time to think everything through, figure out your strategy. And then the fundamental mechanic in a deck builder is that you start the game with a deck of cards, some number of, here we go, we've got magic cards here as an example. So you start with like X cards, and then as you go through, as you progress through your run, you win cards, and then you get to put those cards into your deck. You get to remove other cards from your deck, and you're trying to build a degenerate deck, like a deck with a sick combo in it that just destroys everything in its path. So the most famous of that game is Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire kind of came on the scene and blew the gates open about 3, maybe 4 years ago. And ever since it's been kind of duplicated, replicated. People have been like playing around with that formula. And Wild Frost is kind of like the next iteration of it. It's not a clone. It does its own thing. It has its own unique mechanics. I think the other one was Monster Train, if you've played that. So if you like that kind of game, Wild Frost, I highly recommend it. I've been playing a ton of that, and it's awesome. Okay, what did you write here, Andrew? You said it's so cool. I've played some of the old Cyberpunk games, but this feels much more expensive. The new Jedi Survival. Yes, the Jedi games are really awesome too. It's apparently more open world. I get my fix of video games through YouTube these days. I was playing, I can't remember what it was. It was like an awesome Jedi game, like Star Warsy and super epic. It really felt like you were immersed in Star Wars. But what was hard for me was that you were in these massive maps that were quite cavernous and like mazes. And the what would we call this? Like the mapping system, I guess, like, hey, here's where you want to go, here's your path to get there, was completely lacking. So it was just like your object's roughly in that direction, what you're trying to do, and then here you are, and then this huge map, and I found I would just get lost in these caverns and be like, oh fuck, where am I don't even know what's happening. And when that starts to happen in a game, I start to get impatient and just lose interest. So I really liked the ability to like force shove people and to block, you know, weapon like lasers with my lightsaber and stuff. That was awesome, but that game didn't keep me going. And Andrew, you're saying you're still playing Hearthstone. That's awesome. Yeah, I stopped playing Hearthstone after the Death Knight, like before Death Knight came out. I didn't love what I didn't like about Hearthstone is the mechanic that the attacker chooses how damage is dealt. And what that means is it makes it very hard to kind of set up a strategic board. You're basically vying back and forth, like who can get something to stay on the board. Whereas games like Magic the Gathering, they give you could call it like kind of the advantage to the defender, which leads to games that have more like building up a front, a battle front. And I like that more. I like getting shit out and then doing combos and stuff like that. Anyhow, okay. Let's start with this. I'm going to share my screen here, see if this works, and just walk us through a weekly review. Make sure this works. Pow. Let's see. I'm waiting for Facebook to show me. There we go. Currently it's a black screen. Oh, there we are. Okay, great. So this here is a weekly review. This is actually I have this set up inside Roam so that anytime I type a hotkey command, I can put this on my daily notes. It just kind of copies and pastes it there for me. So every Saturday, maybe every second Saturday or so, I'll do a weekly review. And the point of a weekly review is that we create a system to manage our lives day to day. And yet no system's perfect, and life is myriad, and it's going to throw all this stuff at you. And sometimes you're going to have time to get everything done, and lots of times you're not. And so the weekly review is the opportunity to kind of go and catch everything that fell through the cracks and get yourself back on top. And so usually when I start to feel overwhelmed, when I start to feel like there's so much email and I can't get on top of it and I'm falling behind and I'm worthless and blah, 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 blah. First thing I do is take on that worthless story. But the second thing that I do is usually schedule a weekly review. And so what you're doing with your weekly review is you're kind of like getting everything, you're cleaning everything out, you're scouring it all out. So I'm going to walk you through this process, and there's a couple important points. The most important point is that wherever you are in your bullet point, that's all you're doing. So part of what gets in the way a lot of times is that we start with something like that. We're like clearing a piece of paper off our desk and we're like, oh yeah, that reminds me, I got to deal with that email. And then we go to do that. And then we're all over the place and we're not sure, and we're overwhelmed because we're halfway through 5 different tasks. So part of the power of the weekly review is trusting that it's going to catch everything and then completely committing yourself just to the bullet point you're on. So the first thing that we go through is just the physical stuff. So I like to review all the loose papers on my desk. Is there anything that's sort of just sitting there? Because every time there's a loose paper on my desk, what happens energetically is that piece of loose paper says, here's something you haven't done. If I come into my office, good morning, Darren. If I come into my office and I have like, and hello, America. Sorry, I need to make my comments a little bigger here so that I can see them coming in. There we go. And we'll go like that. And oh yeah, there, now we're talking. So anytime I've got a stack of papers, even if it's just like envelopes that I need to throw out or receipts that I haven't put into our accounting system yet, all of that is like, here's something you haven't done. And there's an energetic impact to that we don't really realize. Energetic impact is every time you come into your office, the first thing that greets you is you have 8 things that you need to get done. And that makes it kind of hard to just focus on whatever it is you want to do. So it's really, really important and valuable. It's a lot like making your bed in the morning. It really helps. So the first thing I do, review all my loose papers, my receipts, everything, scan everything that needs to be done. And then the second thing is clear everything off. So right now I've got a poncho that I was wearing the other day on this chair. This would get put away as part of it. So what I'm doing is I'm getting my office back to a place that's like, it's a pristine space. It's a space I can come into and there's nothing saying, yo, you haven't done this. Yo, you need to make sure you do that. It makes space for all of that. So this is the first step. And as you do this, if you come across something like, oh, this is an email I need to send, you set it aside for the next part. The second part, once we've gone through the physical stuff, is we're going through all of our inboxes. These are the inboxes that are there for me. I could probably add in like WhatsApp at this point. I'm trying to think if there's any other inboxes. I don't think so. These are the main ones. So the first is the big one. Process all email and zero it out. This in and of itself can be daunting for people, because sometimes people have like 400 emails. They will be like, I've got 1,000 unaddressed emails. And I'm like, how is that even possible? Typically, if I just scoot over here, I've got, looks like about, well, does it tell me? How many have I highlighted here? 38 messages. Oh my God, that's more than, I wish I hadn't done that. That's more than I anticipated. Anyhow, so 38 emails. And there's two things that really help me with this. The first thing is I turn off my Wi-Fi. I turn off wireless. And what that does is it lets me send out an email and then not have to worry about anything new coming in. So I'm kind of freezing my inbox as it is. That's that. And I use OS X's mail app, Max mail app. And so what that does is if I send and I don't have Wi-Fi on, it just queues it to send it when I'm back. The second thing I do that's super important, that like makes such a difference for me, is I use Gmail, this one right here, Gmail's mail app. And what Gmail's mail app does that I can't find reliably anywhere else is it lets you snooze an email. So sometimes I've got an email sitting in my inbox where I'm like, I need to do something with this in 5 days, or I need to check and make sure I got a reply, but I don't really want to create a reminder. I don't know what I want to do with it. And so the easiest thing these days is I just go snooze this, show this, bring this back into my inbox in 5 days. What it does is it clears it off of my desk for now, but I know I can trust it's going to come back in 5 days. Super valuable. I'm just going to read what you guys are writing as I'm going through this. Andrew says, I like this. I'll do a weekly review as a reflection of the last week and then planning for the next week. Yep, that's part of this. Consistent aspects of that process, but this is cool where there's an active completion to the week. There's an actual energetic completion of the week, which allows for a reset. Aha. And Darren said, I also do a similar thing on Fridays, and then again on Monday with a fresh perspective. Ooh, that's very lovely. So once I've done that, I process my Facebook inbox, my Instagram inbox, my LinkedIn inbox. Those are all the places where messages tend to accumulate. So if you notice you get a bunch of emails from me on Saturday or Sunday, this is why. Because I probably have just been too busy during the week, or frankly, unwilling. And then Saturday morning, Sunday morning, I sit down with a good cup of coffee, maybe a little bit of Bailey's in it, just to make it a little bit fun. And then I go through all of this stuff. And then the last thing is I process all the reminders. So one of the things that I find really, really helpful is with an iPhone, at least, you can call up Siri just by holding down the thumb button, and you can say something like, remind me to message Pete in 3 days. And then it'll go, great, I've set a reminder for you. And in 3 days, you'll get a little reminder on your phone that says, hey, message Pete. This is awesome. This is so helpful. I'm always doing this. Remind me to write a post. Remind me tomorrow morning to write a post about divine feminine and masculine. Remind me tonight to tell Bay I love her. I don't know, whatever it happens to be. And so that's a great system, provided we keep it, what's the word? Not clinical, like sanitized. Because if you just create a bunch of reminders and then let them sit there, then what happens is you stop paying attention to the reminders and now the system breaks down. So that's the other thing we're doing when we go through a weekly review, is we're restoring a sense of like sanitation, of cleanliness, of like pristineness to our systems, so they can continue to work for us. And sometimes I'll be like, holy crap, I've got some reminders here I gotta address. And sometimes it'll be like, remind me to talk to Pete. And I'm like, fuck off. I don't have time for that. I don't want to do with it. So this weekly review and this part here about processing all reminders, this is how I make sure that doesn't fall through the cracks. It kind of allows some space for our humanity to show up. So once all that's done, I feel amazing. There's a little bit more to do, but that's a great starting point. And sometimes, especially if you're new to a weekly review, if this whole thing is very like out on the skinny branches for you, you haven't got much experience with this, then maybe all you'll do is process your email inboxes. Or maybe all you'll do is review all your loose papers and receipts. And what is important is to hold that as perfect and sacred and great work. If you do any of this stuff, you're moving yourself forward. And then next week, when you come back to sit down and do a weekly review, you'll just have a few loose papers, hopefully, and you'll be able to go to the next thing. So this can be cumulative. You don't have to have this all figured out. It doesn't have to be completely handled. Okay, so then calendar and accomplishments. Like Andrew said, this is an important part of like recognizing like, what did I do last week? Because most of us that are, geared to create stuff in the world, we're very driven. And it's easy for us to look past any wins, to look past anything we've done. So the first thing I do here is I review my previous week's calendar. What were the appointments I had? Who were I talking to? Was it a busy week? Was it an empty week? That's just good information. And sometimes I'll look and I'll be like, oh man, I got hired twice. Oh man, I had that call. I remember that. I did some amazing work with my client or with the forge or something there. So there's real value in just looking back, kind of casting your gaze back thoughtfully over the week and like, how did that go? How do I feel about that? The next thing is review items that I've completed in the last week. I can't expand this because this is just a screenshot, but in my system underneath this, there's a query that shows me every checkbox I've checked off inside Roam Research. You don't have to have it that way. Maybe you have a notebook that you just are like, yeah, what did I do? What's the stuff I accomplished? Or it might just be a mental kind of accounting where you're like, yeah, what are the things I know I did? So I'm really taking a look to see like, what did I accomplish? What did I make happen? And sometimes just to give myself the gift of being like, damn, I'm productive. I got a lot done. And then finally, what's coming up this week? What do I have to look forward to? Is there anything that's, how does my week look? What do my days look like? You know, that can be helpful. Sometimes I'll look ahead and be like, ooh, Tuesday's looking really busy. And then when I see that, I might be like, okay, Monday, I've got some space. I'm going to make sure I block that off. I'm going to create a calendar appointment called blocked off so that I don't feel tempted to fill that with anything. And so that I create an opportunity to have a slow day preceding a really busy day. Or you might do that on the following day or whatever. So looking out to that week, kind of getting myself like, okay, that's what's to come, you know, getting a sense of the weather. Have I really been going for 52 minutes? I don't know what's going on with that. There's no way I've been online for 52 minutes. This screen share is showing 52:30. I don't know what that means. That's not part of the weekly review. We forget about it. We don't care. So next is the to-do list. So the way you can do this any way you want. It doesn't have to be technical, but the way Roam Research works is you can hit Command Enter or Alt Enter on a Windows machine, I think, and it creates a checkbox. Hey, Robin, I'm going to come to your awesome suggestion today. Thank you for it. It puts a checkbox there. And then what this right here does, if I click this button in Roam Research, it expands, it has a query, and the query says, show me every unchecked checkbox from this week. And what that does is it shows me all of the things throughout the day that I was like, I want to make sure I do this, that I haven't done it. And then what I have to do with that is I have to decide, okay, is this still important? And if so, when do I schedule it? And if not, delete it. Or did I do it and I just didn't check it off? And so this is, again, that opportunity for me to catch all of the stuff that sort of like halfway gets in my system or that got into my system, but then is at a risk of falling through the cracks. So getting on top of everything. And if all you start to do every week is like move the same 6 to-dos forward a week, forward a week, forward a week, that's going to provide you some growth. Because what's going to happen is you're going to start to like be faced with the fact that these same 6 things get moved forward. And eventually, if you do that enough, you're going to start to be like, did these matter to me? Do I actually care about these? You'll get sick of them. You'll address it at some point and on some level. You'll either do them, you'll cross them off because they don't matter, or you'll keep moving them forward until that does happen. Often we quit before we get to that point. And the way we quit is we're like, oh, I just keep moving these things forward. What's the point? And then we just say, fuck it, I'm going to stop using this system. It's not working anyhow. No, the system's working. It's bringing you into a confrontation with that tendency with these 6 items. So that's part of the gift the weekly review gives me, is it has me move stuff forward, keep kicking the can down the road until eventually I'm like, I'm not willing to do that anymore. Stop it. So that's all that stuff. And then last is just some cleaning up. So review all my office folders, archive anything I've completed, throw out anything I don't need. Maybe I've got like, I don't know, some notes that are hanging about. I haven't had folders for a while. I used to, I think in this drawer down here in my desk, I used to have like a whole set of folders for stuff like this I'm keeping track of for this project. I think I've got, I don't know where it is. Somewhere buried in these drawers, not getting caught by the weekly review is something here. But this is the opportunity to like kind of take stock of any stuff that you might be holding on to and throw it out if you don't need it anymore. And that's a really important part of the process that creates cleanliness. Lastly, clear off my desktop, not just my physical desktop, but my computer desktop. I want to get rid of stuff that's distracting because icons on your desktop, they demand some visual energy. And then finally, clear out my downloads folder. So I go through the folder where I've downloaded stuff out of the week, and I delete anything I don't need anymore, and I move stuff to the appropriate folder so that it's at least kind of tracked. And then I'm done, the weekly review. And so when people see this sort of check sheet, this can be a really helpful check sheet to have. You can kind of take this, create your own. I find it helpful because it allows me to step through in a very orderly fashion. And because I'm kind of fast-brained, it's very easy for me to review loose papers. Okay, I got to do email. Okay, I got to put that away. Oh, I need to go make coffee. And then I'm lost. And so having stuff printed out that I can be like, what's the one thing to do right now, I find really helpful. And having said that, if all you start to do is create a regular practice where you just have one of these things on there, or like clear out 10 emails, that's going to start to move you forward. You don't have to get all of this handled. You don't have to make all of this. This is something I've grown over the probably 20 years that I've been working with a methodology like getting things done. You just need to start somewhere. Just start to create a regular, recurring, consistent practice, and then start to put things in and notice if it makes a difference for you. And if you do that, I think it'll really start to create a shift for you in terms of like, for me, it's my sanity. I start to feel like, okay, I feel a little more sane. I feel a little less overwhelmed by all of the stuff I have to do. Hey, come over. You're not wrong side, wrong monitor. Yeah, get to this side. One of the things I find kind of funny about this is like when I'm in the process of like holding it all up here, you know, when it's just occurring here, like stuff I haven't done, it feels infinite and vast. And then when I start to actually get down to it, it usually by the end of the weekly review, I'm like, huh, that was a lot less than I was making that mean. It seems much easier. Andrew, you're sharing, you know, new priorities come in for you and you've got a long list of things that continually move forward. You have a hard time letting go. All of us do. And we don't want to let go because we're worried if we don't keep pushing it forward, it'll get forgotten. And so there's an opportunity. Part of what the weekly review does for us, I keep wanting to say weekly world review with the weekly world news. Part of what this does for us is it calls us to like to confront that and to really ask ourselves week after week with some consciousness, is this something I'm actually going to do? And when I usually get to the point where I'm like, probably not, and then delete it, oh, it feels amazing. It feels so good. And then lastly, Andrew's saying, I like the consistency of this rather than waiting for the inspiration to clear off my actual desk to actually have a weekly practice of doing it. That's part of the thing, because typically what happens is we leave this until it amounts to like, oh my God, what a headache. It's a huge mess. And then we spend 3 days getting that pile back down. And then because that 3 days was so like agonizing and felt crappy, we resist doing it again until it builds up. And so our cycle tends to be like, oh my God, everything sucks, overwhelm, clear it out. Oh my God, this feels so much better, but I don't want to do that again. And then like, you know, it's very dramatic. So we're actually introducing like a little bit of boredom to this, you know, we're kind of taking the significance out of it, removing some of the drama and just like, yeah, it's just like weeding a garden. Every week I show up and I weed the garden. I clear out the entropy of life. That's what the weekly review is about. Cool. Okay. All right. Well, let's go to some of these rad questions that y'all had. I saw Robin here first, so let's talk about what she asked. So Robin says, I want to hear, oh, hey, Suraj, nice to see you. It's been a long time. Suraj writes, this is really helpful and I have resistance to committing to doing it weekly. Well, what I would suggest is like, you could do it every couple of weeks or like every month, but instead I would suggest going into the resistance, but reducing the amount of stuff that you have to do each week. So for a starting point, you might just be like, weekly review every week. I'm going to sit down at whatever time you can consistently honor. And then like, all I'm going to do is look at my calendar appointments from last week and look at my calendar appointments from this week, so that you just create a consistent practice. Because once you consistently are doing something, then you can start to bring other stuff in. It's much more powerful to begin with the consistent regularity first, and then to start to layer stuff in, than it is to try to like, okay, well, I'm going to do this once a month, but I'll get everything done. Because that way I don't have to confront the consistency. And the trouble with that is you create this kind of drama that I'm talking about. And then that that builds more resistance. It actually reinforces the very reason you don't want to do it every week. So I would say lean into the consistency, but make it really easy to be consistent. Give yourself like just a simple set of things to do so you can start there and begin to build on it. This is how my morning practice evolved. My yeah, we have Andrew's right. We have the 2020 creating clients cohort in the room right now. Boom. My morning practice these days has like a lot of components to it. It has work with Bay, it has solo meditation, it has clearing, it usually has a writing practice. Sometimes I work with a plant medicine called Hape. There's like a bunch of stuff that all happens in the morning, but it didn't start that way. Initially, where I began like 7, 8 years ago was I would just sort of try to get up on time, but mostly sleep in. And what happened was I joined John Wineland's work, his first ever cohort of the Embodied Men's Leadership Training Program, EMLT. I think you should call it Men's Embodied Leadership Training Program. It would be MELT, be easier, but then that doesn't sound as manly. Anyhow, I did that work, and another man and I decided, why don't we set up a time every morning at 6 a.m. to get together on the phone, and we'll just do practice with each other, some embodiment practice, maybe some chi generator, maybe some what's that one I hate? Chi generator is the one I hate. Ego eradicator is the breath of fire. Chi generator, you're sitting there holding your hands like this for like about 7 hours. It's awful. Anyhow, the point is that he and I got together every morning for about 10 minutes. Sometimes we'd meditate, sometimes we'd do breath work. Didn't really matter. What the gift of that was every morning now I had a reason to get up at 6 a.m. And once I started to do that, I could like backfill behind that. Okay, well, I'm already up. Normally I'd be up at 7:30. What do I want to do with this remaining 45 minutes? I guess I'll write. Okay, great. So I have a practice where I do this and I write. And then the next thing I decided, I was like, I want to practice with Bay. Okay, well, I'll just add that in. So if we start with that consistency and start carving out that space, it's a lot easier to add things in from there. It's sort of like the thin edge of the wedge. Cool. Okay, well, so Robin asks, when I say, what topics do you want? She's very generous. She said, I want to hear how you make sure your relationship is growing and strong with Bay. Romance, love letters. You said you're an open book. Indeed, I am. I'm very committed to being such. Sir, I know. Anyone like Kath and Kim? I know. So the first thing I'll say about romantic relationship is my theory is that it's effortless to drift apart in romantic relationship. And what I mean by that is it requires zero effort and you will naturally drift away from your partner. And that's like, I believe that's held true. I believe that's borne by evidence for a few reasons. The first is that as you spend more and more time together, a bunch of things are going to happen. First, your chemical infatuation is going to fall away. That's going to happen within the first 6 months to a year, usually the first 3 to 9 months, roughly, and around the 6-month mark. We've all had that experience, like, oh, the honeymoon's over. That sucks. So that's going to fall away. Second, you're going to just get to know everything about your partner. There's less to discover. You're like, I know the way they smell. I know how they look naked, as my teacher puts it. I know like the sound they make when I try to be funny. You know all of this stuff. And so there's less novelty. There's less sort of like free excitement. There's less automatic excitement. We can generate excitement. I'm not describing in like something that we can't overcome. I'm saying something without any effort, without any generating, we'll drift away for these reasons. And third, we're naturally going to start to build up contempt and resentment for one another. And that happens because we're not taught how to communicate and to share ourselves and to see each other in a way that is healing. Instead, at best, we sort of like, it makes me mad when you do this. And then our partner gets defensive and it's like, well, oh yeah, well, I do that because you do this. And then both partners are left feeling unheard, fuck you. And then what we're left with is okay, I don't feel better doing this, but I guess the path is just to keep saying this and hate each other. Or I guess I just swallow this because it doesn't really make a difference if I say it, we feel worse. At least when I swallow it, we're not fighting. I guess that's what we do. And as we swallow our feelings, how we feel, what's going on, that becomes contempt and resentment. It builds up over time. I'm annoyed that you do this thing, but I can't share it. I can't allow that to be expressed. I have no way to communicate it, and you're not stopping doing it. Over time, that becomes more and more toxic. So all of these things contribute to relationship simply drifting away. Inevitable, without us generating something different, without effort. Now, drifting away doesn't mean you separate from one another. It's an energetic drift. It's that the romance falls away, the fire dissipates. The model of relationship through like the baby boomers was just stay together, like period. That's what we're going to do. And so you ended up with a lot of this happening, but the people weren't going to split. Divorce was off the table. That wasn't an option. We're not going to leave each other because we made a promise. And so you just had two people that were legally bound, but energetically living very different lives, and often quite a lot of contempt for one another. And the more millennial model, I mean generationally, but also just like, 2000s and beyond, like the model that most of us operate in now, is once that high, that 6 months starts to wear off, and once the contempt starts to come to the surface. So it's like that first year where things are kind of novel. Then there's the second year where the contempt hasn't fully calcified yet. It's building, you're growing resentment, but you're like, it's fine. And then usually around the end of the second year through third year and beyond, that's when people get to the point where they're like, fuck it, this sucks. Why do I have to stay here? And then they end the relationship. So what I'm describing in terms of drifting apart can happen regardless of whether you're legally or physically or tangibly still in relationship to one another. So that's default. To counter that requires generation. It requires us putting energy and effort into the system of our romantic relationship. So the way Bay and I do that is a whole bunch of approaches. Initially, early on, that was like, well, I should pause here. So on the one hand, one thing Bay and I are like really reliable to do is we love our work. We are both deeply committed to transformation. We love what happens when people get like their first breakthrough. We love what happens when coaches learn the gift of transformation in their own being and then learn how to create that for other people. We love what happens when leaders are up against their edge and struggling and fighting and wanting to evade the breakdown and then create the breakthrough on the other side, and what happens in their organizations and careers and lives when that shift happens. So we share that. We both love doing that, and we can talk for hours about that sort of stuff. So in terms of the energy of polarity, what that is two people in an alpha state, the masculine energy, the energy of like moving towards a purpose, making something happen in the world, directive, focused, linearity, going somewhere. So we're both very reliable. Like we can find a lot of common ground and a lot of resonance with each other down that path. And so without anything else, we're going to like, our relationship is going to have that no matter what. Like we're going to be able to talk about that. We're going to have stuff to share with each other at the end of our day, throughout our day, all of that kind of stuff. We're on a shared mission in the world together, blah, 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 blah. So that gives us a bit of juice. But the thing that's less reliable for us is the polarity, not resonance where we're both like that, but polarity where one person is in the alpha energy and the other person's in the omega energy. And so this is what I'm talking about is similar to what I talked about last week, which is the energy of like what creates fuck in relationship. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the energy of fuck, the energy of like, this is exciting, of like chemistry, of fire. And to do that requires, one, you can get it biologically. You can do it at the start of the relationship. That's there for free. But it's also possible to create it in long-term relationship. And to make that work requires a lot of generating on our part. It's not free. It's not just there. Like, hold on. I'll share this piece after I've described. I'm going to lay it up first before I spike it into the net. So the ways that Bay and I really work with that is we're very committed to working with teachers and to an ongoing yogic morning practice in sacred intimacy. So we work with You've probably heard me say this before, London Angel Winters and Justin Patrick Pierce. They've just written an amazing book called Playing with Fire that's all about this. I highly recommend you check it out. It's on Amazon. Their writing is awesome and they're incredible teachers. And before that, we worked more loosely. I did some work with John Wineland, but that was more solo, kind of embodying masculine energy, but done as a solo practice. And Bay did some work with Kendra Kunov, a friend of ours, which was more feminine practice. What we do with Justin in London is two body practice, sacred intimacy being created between two people, rather than like, I'll go over here and do my work in the masculine and you go over there and do your work in the feminine, and hopefully something will happen. And so we work with those teachers every week. Every Wednesday at 4 o'clock, I can tell you that we're going to be in our living room, sitting on our zafuton on a Zoom call with our teachers as they support us. And then in addition to that, every morning, excepting for like the weekends, at 6:30 in the morning, we're in our living room and we're practicing. And what we're doing is we're practicing building polarity with each other, free from like necessarily the baggage of sex, or maybe a better way to put it is like from the ground up. So what that means from the ground up is the first place we're starting to practice building fire is like just through eye contact and breath. So I am breathing for both of us. I am bringing the masculine energy, the directive breath. And Bay is practicing bringing the feminine, embodying the feminine energy, receiving my breath. So she is surrendering to some extent herself over to my breath. If I breathe more deeply than she's been breathing, she kind of gives herself over to that. She's letting me guide us to a deeper breath. And I'm doing work to feel like, how does she feel? Does she need, like, do I need to slow my breath down? Do I need to make my breath a little less deep so that she can kind of get her feet under her? So we're kind of like, we're building the energy of polarity starting at that really simple level. And I got to tell you, it's hard work. It's not as free and easy as I'd like it to be. And it's not that it always is hard work. It's just that we got a lot of stuff that we're working through. And when you start to work at building polarity this way, you learn very quickly how much is in the way of that, which is why so often we settle for like what you could call junk food sex in long-term relationships, where it's like, it's kind of like, yeah, we had sex. It wasn't really fiery or anything, but like I got to come, that was good. You know, like we settle for that. It's like masturbating, but with a partner. And as you start to work with this art, or at least as we start to work with this art, we notice like, oh, there's places where Bay doesn't trust me for whatever reason. You know, she just doesn't experience me as trustable. And if she doesn't experience me as trustable, she's not going to surrender to me. She's not going to give herself over to receive my breath, even at that subtle level. And so then we work with that. And then we have our teachers give us practices that we bring. So like if we had a week where it's like, man, it felt like just moving a boulder up a hill every single morning. It was awful. They're like, okay, great. So what's going on? We talk about it, and then they provide us the next asana, the next yogic practice to take into this week. So maybe that is like, Bay is giving me feedback. How could I give Adam some feedback that would have him feel more trustable to me in this moment? So that as we're just practicing with the breath. So it's not like, you would be more trustable to me if you hadn't done that thing with our car that time 2 years ago. Not that. Not even like, next time I ask you to pick up milk, I want you to ask me what kind of, not that, not in the future, not in the past, right here in this moment. What in this moment could you give Adam as feedback that he could take on that would have you feel like you can trust him a little bit more? And likewise, the masculine is to be a trustable, solid foundation. The feminine, the feedback I'm giving Bay is what would have me feel more of her heart. What would have me feel that Bay is more open in this moment? So I'm like, what feedback could I give her? Maybe, can you breathe and like, let me see your neck as you exhale, or something like that. Just like, what would have her feel more open and free to me? So we're working with that every single morning. And I'll share with you, like, some mornings it feels like a real chore. And other mornings it turns into like sex or whatever, because we're just like, we're less resistant. created a breakthrough, and like that energy starts to build fire, and we start to create in sacred intimacy, the yoga of intimacy, they talk about like this sort of figure eight kind of movement of energy where I'm breathing Bay, she's surrendering to that, letting the moment move her, and then that reinvigorates my energy. And what that does is in polarity work, it starts to create this experience where the masculine, the partner holding the masculine, creates the depth, draws us deeper into the experience of the moment. And then the feminine partner creates the life, the energy of it, the feeling of it. She brings all of the pleasure, all of whatever there is to be experienced. So that's the biggest practice by far that we work with. And prior to this, we've worked with counselors. We've worked with coaches that did like we've gone on like some sexual retreats, you know, where they took us somewhere and like had us do all kinds of things that were quite awkward and scary. And all of that's been good, but this is the work in my belief. My belief is that polarity, sacred intimacy, the yoga of intimacy is the work. That is the path for people that are like, I want an amazing sex life and I don't want it to have to die after that first year. I want it to be something that's real. I want it to be something that's available day after day after day. So that's the work that we really take on with like as high a commitment as anything else in our lives. It's the most important, and it's probably some of the most challenging work. Yeah. So great question, Robin. Thank you for asking. And if anyone has any specific questions about any of that, I'm also happy to share all of it. I'm more than happy to share. Andrew, you write, I really appreciated the conversation you shared on polarity. It's been cool. I was listening to the new book from John Wineland. I didn't know he made a book. That's cool. And my wife is listening in as well. She was intrigued by what was being shared, and I think we're going to start looking into some of these practices together. What I would recommend doing is checking out Justin in London. They do like weekly practices just online for people. And I think you might be able to join for free once a month. So I'd highly recommend their work. It's just so good. Your conversation around polarity led me to listen to that audiobook by John. Pretty cool to see that process. Yo, yeah, I love it when one thing leads to the other thing. The other thing I'll share is like, this tends to be work I end up doing with my clients too. Because as you know, I've been in this work for about 4 years, this particular line of work. And in my opinion, most people rush off to teach this stuff after they've dipped their toe in the water. But the more you immerse yourself in this, the more it naturally becomes a part, like in coaching, the more I immerse myself in this, the more it's just naturally part of like who I be as a person. So when I'm working with people, I'm always engaging with them ontologically. I'm listening to their being. How are they showing up? That's always the bedrock. But then I'm also noticing things like, oh, how does this align with like maybe Enneagram or parts work or like yogic, like what is this like in terms of polarity and that sort of stuff. So this, I tend to work with my clients in this regard too. Hey, Daniel, it's nice to see you, brother. Daniel says, do you have limitations or restrictions for the services you provide? Do you only work with individuals or groups? No, I don't. I don't have any limitations or restrictions. So like, I have my offerings, which is sort of like, because I have to put something in the ground, right? So my offerings are the Forge, primarily for people that want to do group work with us and want to learn transformational leadership, and then one-on-one work. But I'm open to being enrolled in anything. You know, if people are like, hey, me and 3 other couples really want to work with you and Bay, can we create something? The answer is totally, absolutely yes. So we're always dancing. And that's usually the most fun, is when someone shows up and they're like, can we create something particular for me? So I have a few clients right now where we've created something like that. And those people tend to get the most out of our work because it requires a degree of commitment to show up from that place and say, I want to create something, as opposed to just, what is the world offering me? Great, I'll take it or I won't. It's not to say that the other clients don't get a ton of value from our work and don't show up in it. But the people that kind of like keep pushing and saying, I want this, but I don't want it to look that way, I want it to look this way, those are the people that tend to create the most value for themselves, because they're eager. Yes, Robin, I'm going to put their names right here. Justin, Patrick, Pierce, and London Angel Winters. They have a Facebook group called the Yoga of Intimacy. So if you go there, you'll see some of their posts. They've written 2 books. Their most recent one is Playing with Fire, which just came out. I highly recommend that book for any couples that are like committed to long-term relationship, but wondering like why sex is fine, but why is sex fine? I don't want sex to be fine. And I'll share, like, for Bay and I, for the first 10 years of our relationship, there was very little, almost no sex at all. So if we can create that kind of fire, so can you, regardless of where you find yourselves. It's all available. It's all available. And their work is absolutely amazing. Highly recommend it. Okay, so awesome. Robin, thank you so much for that. Let's go to what Monica asks. Hey, Tara, nice to see you. Yeah, eagerness as a path to creating value. Like, it's eagerness and it's commitment. Because when people keep knocking on the door and saying, like, it's like that person that shows up at the Shaolin temple and they're like, go away. And the person's like, fuck you. I'm going to sit right here until you let me in. And they're like, go away. And the person's like, fuck you. That person, when they get in, they're going to show up because they really came up committed. Whereas when someone comes and says, like, what's on offer? Yes, I'll take it, or no, I won't. There tends to be a little less of the fire of commitment in that person's belly. So then we have to do some work to create that in the coaching. But those people that refuse to leave the temple, those are the ones that usually make the most of it once they get into it. See what Monica's written us here. Hello, Monica. Monica says, can you talk about how you would help a leader lead through and resolve conflicts among team members? And then I asked her for a bit of elaboration, and she said, yes. Disagreement on solutions for a problem the team is solving. So for example, say one person opposes a solution strongly, but then the other person goes and implements it anyway, or goes another side route to kind of get their way. If both parties have logical reasoning, how can a leader lead them to resolve this with each other? And if not, how can you lead the team through such strong disagreements, conflicts, resentments in service of developing their leadership? So there's a couple things at play here. The thing that's happened, we'll say, is that 2 people on the team have different paths and one person is just basically bulldozed. And then that's created frustration, resentment, whatever. So let me drink some tea and just sit with that first, because there's a few threads and I want to make sure I'm speaking to them in a way that makes sense. So there's resolving what's happened, and then there's getting out in front of it in the future. Like how do you, as a leader, how do you be with your team and lead your team in such a way that this sort of thing, there's not a clearing for this kind of thing to happen? Not because it's wrong, but because it's not necessary. That's where a lot of leadership goes afoul. First of all, is that people see that happen and they're like, okay, that's not allowed. And then you're not actually addressing the reason it happened. Like, it didn't happen because this person's a dick and it was allowed or they didn't know. That's not why this conflict, this event came to be. And so when you say it's not allowed, it's like you're just putting a lid over top of it. That water's still boiling. You're not addressing the actual thing. So that's not what we're talking about when we're looking at who is there for me to be, such that there's a clearing in which that doesn't show up. So we're going to come to that. So we'll set aside how do you address what's happened for now, and instead talk first of all, like, what's the dynamic that's playing out and why is it happening? So typically what happens is that when there's a thing that needs to be resolved, people come up with a solution, they do their own thinking, and they have a plan, and then they bring that to the table, and the person says, we're not, like, here's why that won't work. And here's why that won't work is not the same as giving this person who's bringing the solution a real experience of being gotten, of being listened to in such a way that they have the experience that you've come all the way over into their brain, really, and really understood every single facet of what there is. Here's why that won't work. usually leads to these situations that you see all the time in arguments on Twitter, all the time in political debate, where it's like one side's like, here's why we have to do it this way. And the other side is like, here's why that won't work. And the other side's like, no, 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 it will work. You're just worried about the wrong thing. So both sides are ignoring the other side, and neither of them are feeling gotten heard. And as long as we don't feel heard around something, we can't release it. We can't let go of it. We clutch further to it. So the irony is a lot of approaches to leadership that happens. The person's like, here's why not, moving on. And so that person is just sort of left in this situation where they're like, I don't feel that's actually the barrier that this person is saying it is. And so now what do I do? They're telling me that my idea won't work, but I don't believe that that's true. And then that person's choices are one of two things. They can swallow it, gulp, and just like, I guess I just work at a company that doesn't have the vision to, they'll sort of stuff it down. It'll breed contempt and resentment and frustration, and eventually they'll just leave. Over time, that becomes toxic, and people gather more evidence then to prove that this company's not forward thinking. On and on and on and on. So that's door number one. And then door number two is that they act out. They say, fuck it, I'm just going to do the thing. I'll show them. It's not the problem they say it is. So that's what happens when people aren't given the experience that they are really gotten. So what needs to happen, first and foremost, is that us as a leader, we have to listen to this person in such a way that they, again, I'm repeating a bit, but like that they're left feeling totally gotten. That they're left like, oh my God, this person really, like, they get my idea. And their objections are not coming from a place where they don't get the idea. Their objections are coming from wherever else. And so the way we do that is that we first accept that anytime anyone brings us anything, we're going to have a position. We're going to have our own like thoughts, feelings, beliefs. Here's what I know. Here's why that wouldn't work. We listen through that lens. And so then the way that kind of plays out is that we're listening, like our listening could be described as, okay, this is a good idea, but this person doesn't realize X, Y, and Z, and that's why this won't work, but I'll let them finish speaking so they feel heard. That doesn't leave people feeling heard. It leaves people feeling kind of filtered. It leaves people feeling patronized. And you might think you're the world's greatest poker player, and that you do you've read books on psychology, and you do all the right things with your eyebrows, and you peek them at just the right time. You go, at just the right time. And you're certain that this energy of like how you're listening to them is not coming across, and you're wrong. The energy always comes across. It is always felt. Don't believe me? Sit in a coaching conversation with me, and I will reflect your being to you, and you'll say, no, 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 it's not that. And I will do it again. It always comes across. We cannot hide our being. People might not consciously be aware of it, but unconsciously they feel it. So the impact of how we're listening to them lands in there. And so they might not even realize that that's why they're just pushing this idea forward, or why they start to hate you as a boss, or why they start to feel that your organization is just not forward thinking enough. They might not have any of the awareness, but that's what's going on. So we have to set aside everything we think we know, and we have to listen to someone as though everything they're saying is utter truth, because to them it is. So we have to set down like, oh, they think that because this. No. Oh, this is real. In what way is this real? What do I have to get on board with to really get how this occurs to them? Like, what else do I need to sort of hold as true in this moment to really see things the way they see them? And so we have to bring a lot of curiosity with them, with ourselves and to them. Sort of like if something's not quite making sense, okay, got it. Okay, so I see you want to do that, but then what about this? How does that get? And two things will happen if you start to cultivate a practice of listening to people this way. The first thing is that let's talk for you first. The first thing is that you might discover something new beyond what was available inside of the world that you already were right about, that you already knew as a leader. And the second thing is that they are going to be given the experience of feeling totally gotten in what they're sharing. And when people feel completely gotten in what they share, they can release it. They can let go of it. They're left like, okay, Adam actually gets what I'm sharing. It didn't feel like I got dismissed. It didn't seem like he was just telling me or placating me or anything. Like, I feel like he really understands. And from that place, we as a leader can then make a choice. It doesn't mean we'll make a different choice, although our choice is probably going to be better informed because now we've gotten whatever we learned from listening in this particular way to this particular member of our team. And so then when you say something like, okay, I really get it. That makes sense. I can see that. This is the decision we're going to do. And here's why we're going to do it. Even though I really get what you're saying, that person is left feeling different than when you say, here's why that won't work. This is the choice we're going to make. Because instead of just feeling like he doesn't get it, they're left feeling like he gets it. And while I really want to make this decision, he's going that way, even though he gets it. That might seem very similar, but it creates radically different experiences and approaches. And so what happens then is this team member can release stuff. Okay, so that's a lot I just gave you. The fundamental part of that is the leader must learn to listen in such a way as to leave people feeling gotten. And if you start to do that, people will hang on to stuff less. They will clutch at things more. They still might have to. You might have to be like, look, is there something you feel I haven't gotten yet? You know, like you got to manage your time, of course, right? Sometimes people are like, I still want to do this. It's like, I know, I heard, but this is the path we're going. And you as a leader get to decide. You might be like, okay, this person still hangs a little attached. Is there something you feel I haven't gotten in what you've shared? And then you can, again, continue to practice. And if you're new at this, you want to practice more of that, more of really getting the person. And if you're quite artful in this, if you've been listening so as to leave people feeling gotten for a long time, there is sometimes a point where you just have to be like, look, I've listened. I feel I get something. You haven't shared anything I don't think I've heard. It sounds like we're just reiterating the same stuff. So I think it's time, like, I really get how important this is. I understand, but this is the decision we're going to make. And the extent to which you've helped someone feel gotten will be the extent to which it's easier for them to release the idea. And once they do that, then the team can move more cohesively because you don't have 8, 4, 2 people holding conflicting ideas in a fight, hanging on to them. Instead, people can let go and get on board with the team, get re-enrolled in the possibility, the vision that you have for the team. So that's ultimately the path to not get to where Monica's described, which is like one team does that. Now we can push that off, we can clear that off our desktop and we can talk about, okay, but this happened. So what do we do to deal with that thing in the moment? Oh, there's a few more things I want to say. Most leaders believe they listen very effectively. Most leaders listen very poorly. And so as coach, because that's part of what Monica's asking here, part of what I do is I reflect this to people. And the way someone is being out there is the way they're going to be inside the conversation with me and you and everyone else. And so I can guarantee you, if this person is not a very good listener, what's going to happen is I'm going to offer this reflection and they're going to be like, yeah, I don't think it's that. Here's what it is. They didn't listen to anything I said. They've got their idea of the thing and then they're bulldozing with their idea of the thing. So they're doing the same thing that their staff member did. This is, you can almost guarantee, you could bet money that this is how it's going to go because how the team is being is how the leader is being. And so almost always when you're working to support a leader to like listen better, to listen so as to leave people feeling gotten, to listen to really receive something and set aside their position, there's going to be a point where you kind of have to put that in front of their face in the middle of your coaching session. And so that's the other thing I do to really support people with this is I listen to how they're listening and I notice that and then I offer that to them. See, it's happening right now. You're insisting you're a good listener, but I notice you just completely dismissed what I said and went right back to your point. Then we have to work with that. There's like some artistry to that. There's some skills in coaching, which I'm not going to go too far into. That's kind of the domain of the Forge, if that's something you want to deepen into and learn. So that's how we would work with a leader to develop this ability is start to notice their listening. How do they listen? And there's 2 ways that people listen poorly in coaching. The first is what I just described. I notice that you don't listen very well. Oh, it's not that. It's actually just that I have a point. No, you didn't hear what I just said. I'm offering you a reflection. You don't listen very well. And then you immediately set that aside and see, you're doing it right now. So that's the one way. They bulldoze past, they hang on. The other way people don't listen very well is they take everything that is said as gospel. So the way that kind of occurs when you're supporting a client like this is you'll offer them a reflection. They'll be like, oh my God, that's so true. You're so right. Yes, absolutely. That's the thing. And it's almost like their brain falls out, and then your words are just getting in there, and then that's their new truth. And that's not actually listening either. It's more agreeable. It's more appealing to the coach's ego, the leader's ego, but it's every bit as toxic, because that form of listening, those words are going to come in and bounce around their empty head until the next set of words come in, and they're going to bounce around, and nothing takes root. So for someone to really listen, they kind of have to let it come in, and they have to wrestle with a little bit the parts of themselves are like, yeah, but so that it can like kind of take root and get itself set up amidst the world that they also know. So when someone's overly eager with me, when they show up and they're like, totally, coach, tell me more. I'm like, I notice you don't really listen. You just sort of accept. I notice that it's weird because there's never any conflict that shows up for you between what I'm offering you and where you find yourself. You just sort of abandon yourself. What do you make of that? So then we have to address that. Okay, so that's how we work with a leader like this. That's the clearing we seek to support them to create on their teams. Now we can talk about this thing that's happening in the moment, which is, just to reiterate, one person has opposed strongly the solution. The other person just went ahead and did it. Fuck you, I'm going to do it anyhow. And then here we are. So we've got some cleaning up to do. The first thing is that we need to support the leader to get complete themselves on how it's gone. Because when something like this happens on a team, you can pretty much guarantee that the leader's going to be making someone wrong. Themselves, fuck, I'm a bad leader, I shouldn't have blah, blah, blah. Or members of their team, well, fucking idiot, went ahead and did this. I didn't give them the go ahead. They just bulldozed over that, whatever. So the first thing that we support that leader to do is to do what's called completion. And completion is getting to a point where it doesn't mean you're not going to do anything, but it means that you're holding whatever happened is perfect exactly the way it went. It had to go this way. Sort of like when a child touches a hot stove and burns themselves, we can be like, you stupid kid. Or we can be like, the child had to do that. It's the only way they could have learned that the stove is actually hot. I can tell them for the rest of their life that it's hot, don't touch it. But until they touch it themselves, they don't ever have that become wisdom. It just becomes a set of rules to follow. And a set of rules to follow is vastly different than wisdom. That right there is that's the line for this live right there. A set of rules is vastly different from wisdom. I'm out of here. Good night. So the leader we support to take on completion, to get to the point where they're like, okay, what happened was perfect. It needed to get here. And there's some work usually to get to that point. They got to move through their own emotions, blah, 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 blah. Once they can get to that place, then they can come to what's shown up with equanimity, meaning they're not making someone wrong. Because as soon as you make someone wrong, they're going to get defensive. And the person that already bulldozed forward is already like ready for a fight. They already knows that they already know that they did something that pushed out on the edge. And they're kind of like, make me justify. I'm going to justify the fuck out of this. Fuck you. So as a result, we want to come with equanimity. And the conversation to have is really like, first, hey, I noticed you did this thing, right? We're presencing what we're talking about, and we're going straight to it rather than dancing around it. Hey, I noticed that you went ahead and implemented that solution, even though there was disagreement. The person's gonna be like, yeah, we got to work to be equanimous. And then we want to start to bring curiosity. Help me understand what was going on. What had you choose that? And the person's going to have a whole bunch of justifications for why they've done this, why it went the way it did, why this was the right thing to do, blah, 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 blah. So as leader, it's important for this leader to recognize that they're going to be facing defensiveness. And so the more they can be okay with this person, the more that person's defensiveness can dissolve. The more we give defensiveness some reason, some justification for being there, meaning I'm telling you you're wrong, or energetically I'm holding that you're a fucking idiot, or whatever, the more that defensiveness hardens and calcifies. And as a leader, what we're actually seeking to do is have it dissolve, sublimate, if you like. So the way we do that is by not making them wrong, bringing genuine curiosity, help me understand. And once they're there, once they can start to do that, sometimes you actually have to point, like, hey, it seems like there's a bit of defensiveness. I want you to know it's okay. I'm not here to attack you. I do want to support you to step further into your leadership. Are you interested in that conversation? And most people will, assuming you're coming to it with genuine intention. If you're just saying that, I want to support you with your leadership so I can tell you you're a fucking idiot, that's not going to work. It might feel good in the moment, but so we come to them with equanimity, help me understand, have that defensiveness start to dissolve, let them, if they have to justify it for a while, allow them to do that until that starts to move on. And then we can start to bring forward what's going on. And what there is to do with this person is help them get the impact they've had. As soon as you start to reflect the impact someone's had, they're going to go to defending their intention. And so as a leader, we have to have these distinguished, which is why you work with a coach, because the coach will help you distinguish that for yourself. And then once we have those distinguished, we can really recognize like, hey, I really get your intention wasn't this, but I also want you to see the impact it seems like you might not be aware of is you've shut down members of the team, is that people in the team, including myself, are now feeling like, I don't know if I can trust this guy. And as a result, people I notice are starting to manage around you. They're not bringing stuff to you. And so that's the first thing. We're presencing them to the impact that they've had. And then the last thing we're doing is we're going to speak to the possibility that we see for them, what's available beyond this impact. So look, I really get it. Like, it's not what you're committed to. And who I see you here at this company as is someone that like leads teams, someone that like actually leads teams in such a way that these conflicts don't even show up. And this impact's in the way of that. So would you like, are you open to me supporting you to address this impact so that that can be cleaned up? And from there, you can support them to start to like do their own work, get complete themselves so they can get that this was perfect and it's not wrong that they did this, but rather that they had to do this so they could learn. And then to see like, oh, there might be some cleaning up to do. There might be an apology to make. Hey, I recognize you were really opposed to this and I just bulldozed this through. And I can get that that might have had an impact on you. And I'm not sure what it is, but here's what I imagine. And can you share with me anything else? That's awkward stuff, but it's also the only way we can gain wisdom. They have to go through this. And so as a leader, we have to stand for them to go through this process where they made that mistake and it was perfect, not even a mistake, right? They did that thing and it was perfect. And we get ourselves clean and clear first so that we can be the clearing for them. We're modeling it. As a leader, we're modeling it's okay. It had to go this way, and then bringing the conversation forward. And what that does is it shows them how to do it. They're like, okay, I got to like, Adam really received me with grace. How can I bring that to myself? And once they can bring it to themselves, then they can go and show up with people and allow people to share this and they can hold it with grace. The caveat here is what most people want to do as soon as you reflect their impact is go and apologize for it immediately. They want to throw that energy off because it feels bad because they're making themselves wrong for it. And the path to transformation, the path to ontological and transformational leadership is a willingness to sit with our impact and let it burn a bit. That's how we learn, right? That's how you feel that fucking hot stove. And you're like, it burns. And I got to like sit there with that. If I go like that with a hot stove and then run and set about never having hot, we missed the mark. We missed the point. So if you do this and if you stand with your team this way, then your team learns about this and they learn about the impact that they weren't probably even aware of. And what happens when people do this is next time they're conscious of it. And then they have a choice, a real choice, whereas before they didn't. Next time they're like, I remember this moment and I want to fucking push my thing through, although they're going to be a little bit less adamant about that because you've given them the experience of being gotten. And they're going to sort of sit and like, I remember this and how it left my team is feeling like they couldn't trust me. And that's not what I want. I'm committed to something different here. So how else might there be for me to be with this? And maybe what there is for that team member to do is to listen to the other side in such a way that that side feels really gotten. And then they can be brought on board for the solution. Or maybe in listening to that other side, this person who's the bulldozer is sort of like, wow, I didn't even see it that way. Yeah, maybe that's not the solution then after all. So again, notice the leader doing their work becomes the clearing for the people on their team to do that same work. How do you facilitate this leader's growth as a coach when they're facing this? Everything I just said. So the thing about this that's hard is every time we put something like this in front of someone, they're going to have resistance to it. What I've come to realize or find is that confronting our blind spot is almost the same experience of like people facing grief, death, loss. there's the denial at first, and then there's like whatever anger. And then let's look this up. I want to look this up in the moment. The 5 stages of, what is it, grief? What are the 5 stages of grief? Oh, here we go. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. So maybe not exactly, but like almost always, as soon as a blind spot is reflected to someone, the first thing they do is deny it. No. Here's why it's not that. I understand why you would say that, but I actually think it's a bit different. No, I would never. All denial, right? And then anger, annoyance, frustration. No, bargaining. Well, yeah, I do it here, but that's different. It's an exception there. Sure, sometimes I get impatient, but that's because bargaining their way. So it's sort of like, yeah, it's there, but I don't know about depression, but then acceptance ultimately is where people arrive at, where they're like, fuck, I can't keep saying I don't do it. It's right in front of my face. I can see it. What do I do? So anytime you as a leader you as a coach or leader put this in front of someone, there's going to be pushback. Just like anytime it gets put in front of me, I have my own pushback. That's the nature of this work. Let's see what you wrote here, Leaf. So the set of rules is vastly different than wisdom. With the commitment to things like a morning framework, which might look like rules, is the discipline that allows for wisdom? I think that's a question. So I think the question is, with a commitment to a practice like morning rules, which occur kind of like, morning framework, which occur a bit like rules, then is it the discipline to do that that allows for wisdom? So I have to be a bit careful because we can start to like cross paths a little bit. So what I'm saying is that, well, the answer would be yes. So like, no, you're fine. It's a great question, Leif. Thank you so much for it. So if I show up every morning and someone tells me, God will hate you unless you do these 5 things every morning, I will do those 5 things every morning because God will hate me if I don't. I am doing those 5 things because there is a rule that I have to do those 5 things. I will not gain wisdom through that process because I'm doing it because I have to, because I should. And so I'll show up and I'll slog my way through them, and I won't learn anything from the fact that I'm slogging my way through them other than I should keep doing this. Whereas if we sit down to start to do something because we want to, or because we don't have to, but there's something there for us that we think, as we start to do those, we'll discover for ourselves, is this supporting me? Is this serving me? Is there a different way to do this? How does this feel in my body when I do this? And from that path, we can start to discover, gain the wisdom of what really does serve me in the morning, as opposed to do these 5 things. When I do these 5 things because I have to, I don't discover what serves me. I just follow rules. When I start to give myself permission to like be in the experience of how it's going, then I can discover, and that way wisdom can happen. So I think that's the way that like that morning framework is not actually a set of rules. It's not something I have to do. Just like the weekly review is not a set of rules. It's a living thing. It grows as I do, and I learn about myself as I go through it and what does support me, what doesn't support me. So that's the thing. Suraj, yeah, it is really a fascinating parallel, because anytime we confront our blind spot, it's a form of ego death. Because the blind spot exists because our identity of self is like, I would never do that. That's the thing that's going to be in our blind spot, is whatever we insist I would never do. Adam is not the kind of person that does that sort of thing. And then when you put it in front of me that I do that sort of thing, there's a death of my identity to some extent. My previous identity was I would never do that. I hate people that do that. And now I have to confront this new version that's like, but actually I do. And that, there's a degree of death there. So it makes a great deal of sense that parallel is there. Awesome question, Monica. Thank you for that. Tara, you asked for discernment versus judgment. If you're here, is there any elaboration you can provide? Like any particular place you want to hear some elaboration on that? I'm going to come to David's question, but I would love to expound on that. But if you can give any more details or anything, it'd be awesome, because then we can go a little deeper into it. So David asks, and I think he's asked this before, I'm curious how your relationship with your parents has shifted over time. Is there something you've noticed has changed? As we grow doing this work, it feels like we outgrow people, including our most close ones like family or friends. Notice myself seeing the relationships of my parents and their patterns has opened up a lot of sadness and heartbreak. Have you experienced this, and what's it been like on your journey? What have you noticed in terms of people not changing, you shifting, how you relate to them, distinguishing having to versus choosing to continue being a part of their relationship? So my arc initially was, as I got into this work, was like, everyone should do this and people that don't are dumb. That was the initial place, like arrogance. Here's a thing that works. Why aren't you all doing it? And then kind of that became less sharp and sank a bit below the surface. And then there was sort of like, I'm just going to do the work over here, and then people will recognize the benefits of that, and then they will start to do the work. And then we could put in brackets, because they should. So like early on, my experience with my relationship with my parents and the people closest to me was a lot of me relating to them through that lens. Some flavor of, they're dumb for not doing this, or like they should do this, but they're not. So there's something deficient. Like anytime there's a should and someone's not doing it, then there's some wrongness to that, right? You should do this and you're not. Everyone should work with a coach, that kind of thing. And that, first of all, that's obnoxious to be around, but that's all good. That was just like me. That's how I had to gain this wisdom, right? I had to go through that path. So I think everyone at some point along the journey of spiritual growth has to confront that gate. We have to confront our arrogance. And some lucky people like me get to confront it all the time, again and again and again. Spirit has a lot to teach me about humility. So what has shifted for me over time is that I can see things. Like for my parents, I'm deeply versed. I'm masterful in this work. I have like the ability to see people at a depth that is uncommon. It's uncanny. It's highly trained, and I've spent thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars and hours and time and made it my life's work to do that. So of course I can see stuff. But part of what shifted for me along this journey is learning that initially what I thought, what I could see, I held as the way. It's the way. That's the path for them. And over time, with a lot of maybe not so fun lessons, where I make a mistake or I send an email and someone's like, fuck off, or, I'm clumsy, or, any of that stuff. I'm not trying to step over, I just don't have an immediate example. What that's changed is I can see a way for people. I can see a breakthrough that's available for someone, but who's to say if that's the breakthrough that they want? Who's to say if that's the path for them to get there? Maybe that's a breakthrough 7 lifetimes down the way. Maybe they come back to this mortal 3D natural physical world 7 more times before that's the breakthrough. Or if you want to be less esoteric, maybe they never create that breakthrough. Maybe that's just not their path this time. Or maybe they've got to do all these other things before they come back to that point. Or maybe I'm wrong. All of these things are there. They're all possible. So what that's created for me is softening a little bit in what I can see. It doesn't mean I'm wrong always, sometimes, but like often I can see stuff. I'm pretty good at this. But I've softened in like how I relate to what I see and what it means about the people that they're not doing the thing that I see is available for them. And so ultimately where that's taken me with my parents is loving them exactly the way they are and holding them perfect exactly the way they are. And like seeing, for me, like the man I am is a function of them. They raised this. So they must be doing some pretty fucking awesome work, because I think this guy's pretty fucking cool. And so I start to hold it in that light. And there's some like the big thing here. I'll share a bit and then come back to this. Like one of the hardest things for me is my dad, much like me, is very, very brilliant, very, very funny, very, very hard-headed, much like me. Not leaving myself out of this. So like once I get an idea, once I get like, here's how it is, it's hard for me to let go. There's a lot of why I work with coaches and teachers, because I get so wrapped around that. And I've done a lot of work to soften in this regard, but like it's there. And when I'm confronted, that's readily available. And while I've done a lot of work to sort of soften that, I would say my dad has learned, he's got 40 years on me too. So he's calcified more into that. My experience, my sense. And the result of that is that there's sort of like an ongoing conversation with him, which is just like, I don't understand why anyone would pay you guys any money for what you do. That's kind of the bulk of it. And it's like, my brother's a radiologist, very good one. And that is very understandable. You know, it's like easy for my dad to get that. And for me, there's like a heartbreak for me, which he will never, I don't think, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but my sense is he'll never really be able to get the way I want him to get the impact I have in the world, the difference I make for people. And it doesn't matter. Like I've told him my rates, that goes right over his head, because all he can see is this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. These people must be really messed up to pay you that kind of money. And then immediately turns right back to the conversation like, are you doing all right financially? Yo, I just, it's maddening if I let it be maddening. And where I've arrived is like every time he is asking questions that can be like, he'll ask a lot of questions that are sort of like halfway trying to understand what I do, but that plunks it inside the box he has for it. What's wrong with these people that blah, blah, blah. And the context of like, he doesn't appreciate it, he doesn't get it, that's always available for me. What I do is these days I work to really get, to hold, to create for myself that that's him loving me. That's him wanting to understand what I do. He's inside a box about it that probably won't allow for it. And what I really want is for that box to go away and him to be open, for an 80-year-old man to just like drop all of his ways that the world is and be like a newborn child, but that's probably not going to happen. But what I can do is every time he asks a question, even if it initially riles me, I can be like, he's asking because he wants to understand what I do. He's just probably not going to be able to, but the desire is there. And can I see that desire as him loving me, loving his son? And can I love him for that, for him wanting to come over here, even if he probably never will be able to fully get me the way that I really wish I could? And for me, that provides me so much more access to loving him. I love both my parents a tremendous, more than I ever have in my life. My dad and I tend to be a little more like this, or my mom and I a little, but like that provides me so much more access to loving him exactly as he is, and to like really being able to get that he does love me and he is proud of me. It just might not come across the way I really wish it would, the way I want it to. And that's a bit, I think, the nature of this life, right? We can sit there with our arms crossed, fuming at our parents or our friends or whoever, because they aren't giving us love the way we want to. I gave them the love language. I told them my love language, and we can be right about that. But all that does is it denies you the experience of love. And the opportunity for anyone committed to ontological leadership, which is to say like living their life in an empowered way as a function of who they're being, the opportunity is to meet the world not as it should be or as you want it to be, but to meet the world as it is. This is what's available. Can I let that be sufficient? Can I really let that land in my heart as love? And so that's how it shifted. Initially to like sort of anger, righteousness. I already had plenty of that anyhow. But then over time to like a softening, and to really like an experience of being truly loved and really loving them exactly as they are. And I can see all those patterns, but at the end of the day, they're pretty happy and they've done a pretty amazing job and modeled for me what it is to have a really good life. And yeah, my sense is I'm expanding my consciousness beyond the point that they have theirs by virtue of all this work I do, but that's the role of a child. And if Bay and I have our child, they will do the same for us. Might not look the way I think it will, but they will do the same for us, because that is the role of children. That is how we mature spiritually as a species, is that children expand the consciousness of their parents and beyond a particular point. So great question, David. Thank you for bringing that. I'm just going to read what you wrote here, Andrew. You wrote, that is a deep understanding of the context, Adam, to see the love that is underneath the words. My dad was a very broken man, but one thing he did always was champion me as best he could. I've been in my own process of seeing the love that he gave me, even when I rejected it. Yeah, that's beautiful work, Andrew. Thank you for doing that. This is, in spiritual work, we'd call this the work of healing our lineage. And I want to put in a caveat for people, because it's easy for people to hear this and they'd be like, Adam, you don't understand. My father, he was a jerk, or he hit me, or my mother did these horrible things to me. I'm not advocating anyone do anything. I'm sharing what my healing has looked like in terms of my relationship with my lineage and my father and my mother and all of that. And my sense is that's available for all of us. And sometimes before we can do any of that, we have to just be right that our parents are wrong. Until we let ourselves have that, we can't let go of it. And ironically, we kind of have to let ourselves have it without the thought that then we'll be able to let go of it. Because as soon as you're like, I'm going to let myself have this, provided it then leaves, you're not actually letting yourself have it. So I'm not telling anyone how their healing has to look. I'm simply intending to share how it looks for me and to really honor that that's a challenging process. And then Andrew, you also write, your flavor has been that coaching is the best, all caps, modality for creating transformation. There's still a part of me that believes it, but I'm opening to the fact that each person has their own path and can choose the medium to support their growth. Yeah. Like, I find that too. And I find it's interesting, because I find in a spiritual path, everyone is moving along their spiritual path. And the nature of a lot of religious dogma is like, no, but here's how you have to move along your spiritual path. And for some people that really works. And for other people, it causes harm. That's the nature of dogma. The spiritual path, we're all moving along it. Even people that you're like, not that person, they're just a druggie or something. It's actually part of their spiritual path. The challenge, and what dogma actually seeks to overlay or not allow, the challenge, the really hard part, is to trust that actually that is the path, that is the journey. Okay, we have, Tara did not provide any elaboration. It's all good. She's probably moved on. So she just says, talk about discernment versus judgment. Let's do that briefly. So discernment is kind of like something that comes from studying ourselves. And studying ourselves it's a very nuanced, one of my teachers describes it as like almost like a sensitive study. Because what most of us seek to do, or at least what I would have sought to do 15 years ago when I was like impervious and close to coaching, is like I'd study myself by like reading books and then like, how do I feel about that? So I'm kind of trying to study myself from within. And that's what a lot of us are engaged with, is like, how do I study myself from within? We don't think of it that way. It's just, we can't escape, like left to my own devices, if I'm the one, or with friends or whatever, like I can only get so far, because it's still kind of a part of my extended self. And so this is the reason those of us committed to the path of consciousness and spirituality and transformation make a commitment to work with teachers outside of ourselves, coaches, transformational leaders, plant medicines, ayahuasca, incredible teacher, even mushrooms. Now, I'm a believer, if that's the modality you're going to choose, that it's best served when you engage with like someone who can hold that container for you, so that you're, again, they'll help you get outside of yourself, but then you're left entirely to yourself to interpret and to make meaning of that. It's going to work to an extent, but it's always going to be more powerful when you engage with someone outside, some entity beyond just that. Likewise, ayahuasca, likewise, any plant medicine. So anyhow, all of these are ways of studying ourselves with the support of something that allows us to get a little bit outside of our kind of viewpoint. And as we do that, two things kind of happen. The first is that we have a hard time trusting ourselves because we can't discern, we can't separate, like, is this my truth, or is this the part of my ego that's designed to keep me safe? Like, is it true that I just don't like talking to people, or is that just something I learned to do to stay safe? And that discernment is really challenging at first because we've spent years on years on years honing that tendency to the point where we can't, it's too stuck together. We can't distinguish, we can't discern between one or the other. And so I think what Tara's talking about here when she says judgment is sort of like, I feel that's wrong, would be a judgment. Now, how do I know if that's like my spiritual kind of like my integrity speaking, or is that the part of me that learned to separate the world into right or wrong? And how do I determine? So as you work with these teachers that support you to kind of study yourself from outside of your box, what happens is a divide starts to happen. A bit of space gets created between who you truly are and who you know, who you've learned to become. It allows you to start to separate that stuff. And that is how we learn to discern for ourselves. So it's kind of awkward because what people want to know is like, how do I know if this is my truth or if this is my ego? And like what we're looking for is some easy rule. You know, like I saw someone once posted, here's how you know if you have a inherited belief is if your parents also have that belief. Okay, but that's a nice rule, right? It's convenient, but then does that mean I just abandon all, like the trouble with that is it just, again, it's a rule we're following rather than wisdom earned. And what we're seeking often is to avoid having to earn wisdom. We're trying to get wisdom without having to go through the awkwardness of earning it, the clumsiness, the falling off the bike as you're learning how to ride the bike, the having that awkward, shitty impact you really didn't want to make as you learn how to be more artful in the way you show up. And so the way we learn to discern, to get better at separating and more finally noticing ourselves and studying ourselves better, is we be willing to submit to the humility and the vulnerability and the intimacy that comes from working with teachers like this, working with coaches, working with shamans and facilitators of plant medicines and stuff like that, working in deep transformational traumatic therapy, working in whatever your modality happens to be. It's all fine and good, but like working with people that exist outside of ourselves so we can bump into that awkwardness and then be like, oh, once you've bumped into it, you can start to like, oh, I can see it a little more clearly. And then next time you're in the moment, you're like, ah, fuck, I'm stuck again. I can't tell. And you make a choice. And you're like, oh shit, wrong choice. And then it becomes more and more and more space. And then after you've learned to be able to discern really cleanly and you can start to tell, then what you do is you step into a bigger game that you're playing in life. You start working with people that are 10 times the net worth you used to be working with, or you start selling mansions instead of condos, or you start like arguing in front of the Supreme Court of Canada instead of the Supreme Court of British Columbia. And what happens is it gets right back together because your fears are your fears, and you could discern at a certain level, but now you're playing at a bigger energetic level. And as a result, you feel yourself stuck again. And we get frustrated. And we're like, fuck, why? So that's how discernment is gained. A teacher of mine, a shaman I worked with, once said, you know, the archetype of wisdom, the archetype that most embodies wisdom is the fool. And the reason for that is that the fool is willing to stand on the rug knowing it's going to be pulled out from under them. And they know that that's the only way wisdom can be gained, is we have to be willing to like get on that bike knowing we're going to fall off of it, because it's the only way we can learn to ride the bike. And we look at that and laugh at the fool, what a moron, but the fool is the wisest of all. So embody that archetype. Andrew, you're saying, how would we find that out if we have the same belief of our parent if our parent is no longer living? I'm seeing some flaws in that thinking. Yeah, I mean, it was that Andrew's referring to the sort of inherited belief. It's punchy, you know, and punchiness is what sound bites, punchiness, that's what really makes a difference, you know, like, or not makes a difference. That's what gets shared. We want that like punchy stuff. People always want me to simplify my work, as do I. But like a lot of punchy stuff, it won't work. The way you are going to discern your sort of beliefs about the world from who you truly are is by engaging in the sort of practice that's going to bring you into confrontation with those things, where you're going to have to like feel the clash. And then from there, from that wreckage, the detritus, you can start to pick it apart and be like, oh, got it. Now I understand. So we kind of have to seek out, or we don't seek them out so much as like commit to stuff like learning how to ride a bike that will inevitably have us fall off the bike. The metaphor I like is we have to choose into playing games so as to win them, rather than playing games so as to avoid losing them. And as we age, we move more and more into the latter. So much of our life becomes like, how do I manage all this stuff so that that breakdown doesn't happen? Instead of, I'm going to go towards that breakthrough, and I'm willing to face the breakdowns that happen. I'm willing to go through that path. That's tough. That takes a lot of courage, and it takes swimming against the current of the world, because the world swims in the current of certainty, the current of avoiding breakdowns. Step into this work, you're a little crazy, but crazy about being alive, as one of my teachers says. Okay, anything I've missed? Discernment, judgment, team conflicts, romantic relationship, families of origin. We talked about Wild Frost. That was good. There's a pickleball tournament this Saturday that I am probably not going to be in. They're looking for spares, so I might join in and play spares. Having a Tekken competition with two friends over at my place, Tekken 7. It's been a long time since I've really gotten out the fighting games and chopped it up with some friends, so that's going to be cool. But if you're curious about pickleball and all its glory, and you want to see it played in a fun kind of setting, go to the Oak Bay tennis bubble on Saturday. It's going to be there in the afternoon and the evening, I think around 5 to 7. It's going to be lit. It's going to be awesome. If you haven't already, check out my book on Amazon, Who Do You Think You Are? We talk about all of this sort of stuff. Thanks, Leaf. Thanks for hanging out. Really lay all of this out into like some scaffolding that you can kind of understand and go into much more detail. And if you haven't thought about playing with us in the Forge, I really recommend you check that out. You can go to evergrowthcoaching.com/the-forge. I'll put the link in the chat and in the comments. That is the place to kind of develop this ability to discern, to develop this ability to work transformationally, and to have people stand for you and support you to create those breakthroughs. It's life-changing. It's amazing. Hope you guys have a freaking awesome weekend, as one of my clients says. And thanks for hanging out. See you guys later.